Well, thanks so much, guys, for having me. I feel weird, like not holding anything or like touching anything. So sorry if I awkwardly move around and stuff. Thanks for being here and thanks for the introduction. My name is Tracy Layne. I've been a photographer for 10 years, and can anybody guess where I got my start? Slick. It's actually kind of an interesting story. I had gone to school. I'd been in school for 4 years. I'd transferred from Utah State down to Dixie to Slick, doing some classes at the U. Just really one of those kids with no direction and not sure what I'm doing. Nothing's working. I'm real bad at math, like hardcore failed math several times, even with private tutoring, just couldn't do it. Anyway, the last semester I was in school before I unfortunately did not finish with a degree. Education is very important. Make sure you get a degree. I didn't get mine, but the last semester I was in college, the class I took was Photography 101 here at Slick. Had a great teacher, and I couldn't remember his name, and I ran into him the other day at a Picture Line. It's a photography store right downtown. And I was returning some equipment they'd let me borrow for one of my retreats. And I ran into him and I said, you are the guy that taught me photography and got me the start. And I told him kind of my story and where I'd gone and what I'd done with that one class. So please don't be like me and give up and not graduate. But I really value the education I got, even if I got nothing else but that one class. This is where it got me. So like I said, I'm a photographer, and I work with families, anything family related and commercial work. You'll not see a lot of my commercial work because I don't love it quite as much. It's kind of boring for me. But I really love families, kids, newborns, birth stories, things like that I shoot a lot of. I took that class probably 11 years ago here at Slick. Learned the basics, which was super important. To understand the basics of photography and how to use your camera, because it's so simple these days to take a picture with your phone, slap a filter on it. You can people are selling presets. Like, it's real easy to just make a decent looking picture on your phone, but true photography runs quite a bit deeper than that, and there's a lot of technical aspects that I'm really grateful I learned here to kind of launch me forward with a really firm foundation. So I took that class about 11 years ago, and I started my business up probably two or so years later, at the bottom, charging not near enough, and working my way up. And now my business does really well, and I've gone on to expand into studios, and we'll get into all of that. But let's see. So here's just a little sampling, kind of some of the stuff I do. Again, I really like kids. I really like simple and clean stuff. One of the things I teach the most about is how to work with natural light. I've never really liked working with artificial light and strobes, and I don't have to, because I work with families and kids, and I have control over when I shoot my sessions. Wedding photographers don't always have control, and you need a backup. You need other equipment. So one of the things I'm really good at is working with light, particularly working with really difficult forms of natural light, like things like this, where this is out at Saltaire, where the sun's really bright and people have a hard time working with it because the sun's so intense. I'm really good at that, so I teach people how to do that. And on the other end of the spectrum, I'm really good with low light, when you walk into situations and there's not a lot of light. I know how to work with that too. So I'm really kind of good at working with all the different kinds of light that you encounter when you need to be able to just work with what you have. If you don't have that equipment or the skill sets to use that equipment, I'm pretty good at that stuff. So I teach a lot of that. Just a little bit of studio work. I love maternity. I think it's such a beautiful time. I love documenting that. So there's just a little bit about my work and how I got started. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk to you about not just photography, but for me, the photography path that I was on, that I never dreamed it could be what it became. And then just when I thought, wow, I can't believe I was able to do this, it launched into something completely different, another thing that I never would have imagined that I can do. So I want to kind of talk to you about, in this particular field, when you're saying it's kind of like career day, So we're talking in the creative arts, and I think it's not just photography. If you're anything creative, graphic designers, writers, artists of any kind, this stuff is going to apply really heavily to you. And business in general. If you've got kind of an entrepreneurial, is that a word, entrepreneurial mind, this is going to be hopefully really beneficial for you, because that's been my journey. But starting with photography, I should have added that at the top about how important it is to learn the basics and understand your camera and understand light and understand manual settings in a camera. You have, just like any other industry, I think you have to learn the basics. And it's really easy now with all the great technology to skip over that, and it looks all right. You know, this looks pretty dang good. But without what's built underneath it, I see a lot of photographers now rise really quickly in the popularity because they're such great marketers just off their Instagram, their phone. Their marketing is so good that they look stellar. They look like a world-class photographer. The way they've selected their imagery and presented it to the world looks like they're dang good. But, so they build this, big following and kind of a lot of hype around them, but they don't have that foundation and they don't have those basics, and they get into trouble pretty often in situations that they don't know how to handle and that they can't recover with the little tricks of the presets and the apps and things like that. And they kind of crash. They crash hard, and it's sad to see. So same with a lot of different industries. It's so important to start with those really important basics. In photography, I think it's important that you try everything. People ask sometimes, and I remember when I was first starting, and my cousin was a photographer. She wasn't actually in business, but she was just a really good photographer. She was always posting these pictures that were so good. And I was like, how do you do it? How do I learn this quickly? I need to learn this today. I'm ready now. I want to be good. And from her perspective, which was really nice because it wasn't a business perspective, she's like, I just shoot all the time. I just try lots of different things. She has no pressure to she's shooting for no one but herself, so all she's doing is learning. So I encourage you to try things like that, either within this kind of field or something else. Try all different areas, and I promise you something will feel like it fits. Something will feel like that's me. That's mine. And for me, it very quickly was families and kids. I shot a few weddings, hated it. Hated that I didn't have control over my light and where I was shooting and when I was shooting and who I was shooting and what they were wearing. No control, and I didn't like that. Plus, I just don't like to shoot for 12 hours straight. I don't like to do that. I want to go shoot for 2 hours and then go home to my family. So it was an easy choice for me on the inside, but on the outside, I also thought, I can't do this. I can't be a successful photographer if I don't shoot weddings. That's like the big thing, right? You got to shoot big weddings if you want to have a name or anyone to care who you are. So for a long time, I held on to it, and I would say yes when I really, really wanted to say no, and I would regret it immediately and hate shooting it, and you could see it in my work that that's not where my heart was. So when I finally dropped that, guess what happened? Business booms. When I narrowed in on this niche that I wanted to stay in, everything started to get better. So find what you love and then master that. Put everything you have into that thing. And please don't let Sally, who's just shot a $15,000 wedding and got all this recognition and was published in Brides magazine, don't let that distract you from what is yours. That's not for you. This is for you. And you can make that work just as well. But it's really hard in this age of comparison and social media where it's just you're watching what everyone's doing and everybody wants to keep up with everybody. Try real hard not to do that. I feel really grateful that I kind of grew up in my industry before that. I started 10 years ago when there wasn't Instagram or social media platforms, and then they popped up, but they weren't a thing for quite a while. I just didn't have that. So try really hard to just stick with what you know is right for you and focus all of your energy to master that and get really good at it. And then, if you feel pulled to do more, there's more. There's more out there. In any industry, it's not so even though it's something I never dreamed to do, this job as a photographer has opened doors. And I don't want to, open doors sounds like it's easy. I was just walking around one day and this door was in front of me, and behold was this studio business. It was just there, I guess. So that's not the right word to say. But there were all these possibilities that I could see. So if you're doing something, you're doing well, you're enjoying it, but you feel pulled to do a little bit more, think, what skills do you have? What have you mastered? What are you really good at in this field? And then think, what other areas does your skill involve? So for me, it's like, okay, so I'm a photographer. I use gear. I use camera bags. I use straps. I use cords. I shoot in studios. You might use exterior lighting. There's all these little parts of my job and any job that you can start to look at and see, what can this bleed into? What can this skill that I've mastered bleed into? So into the next thing, can you use your current skill to help launch and support something new? So it's just a matter of using whatever skills you have and thinking, what does this touch? And what do I feel drawn to that it touches, that I know that I can help support myself? It's such a cool, amazing tool to have a business, build a skill set, and to be able to use that to launch something else, like to use those skills. And if you didn't have those skills, you couldn't launch that other thing. It's just really valuable to see all the different directions it can take you. Okay, so you feel drawn to do something. You've thought about, what you have to work with, and what it can support. Do you see a need? Is it something you need? Is it something your friends need or your coworkers need? So for me, I remember very specifically a day in December. Gosh, it's going to be like 6 years ago. And I was talking to a friend, and my photography business was starting to get busier. It was to the point where I was like, hey, I'm very for sure growing. This is getting better. And I said to her, I really love Utah, but it really sucks here in the winter. And I really would like to shoot in a studio. So I'm going to have this goal in my head. My goal is to be shooting in a studio in 5 years. That was my goal, and that felt like a super reasonable goal at that time 6 years ago. And that was in December. I think it was probably 2 or 3 weeks later, this little loft photography studio opened up right downtown in Salt Lake. Just a little loft with some pretty windows, had some cool brick and things like that. It's called Photo Collective Studios, right downtown. They opened up this natural light loft, and we're selling punch passes for $300. And I swear to you guys, I was terrified. At the time, we were still students, and we probably had one kid by then or something like that. And we still had more school, careers just getting started, things like that. Money is super tight. That $300 investment felt massive, really scary. What if I don't make this back? What if I don't make this back, But I did it, and I bought that punch pass. It was for 10 hours of time or something like that. And I used those 10 hours of time in a week and a half. I went, oh my gosh, it worked. Okay, I'm gonna buy another one of those. Bought another one of those, and then another one of those. And the studio at that time were like, you're here enough, you just need to lease with us. You just need to be here full time and have this lease, which was $500 a month, which was out of control. We can't do that. And I saw at that time the need for that studio space for me and my business, and I thought, and there were things about it that I didn't like. I was really wanting something super, super white and clean, and at the time that wasn't a thing. I'd seen pictures of it in other places, but it just wasn't prevalent. So me and my friend Jen were kind of in the same boat, both photographers and both in the same spot. We're like, well, could we just get our own? And we're like, well, it seems crazy, because we're terrified about buying these punch passes. What if we have, we got rent now every month? How are we going to pay rent every month? But we're like, well, if we split it between the two of us, maybe we'll be okay. So we do, and we go and get this little 500 square foot space. It's actually in the same parking lot. The building's in the same parking lot as the one that I was just shooting at. Anyway, long story short, we get that studio just to share between the two of us, and the photography community starts going nuts, because it's this all white space, white floors, white brick. It's so bright, the light's amazing. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants to use it. And we're like, well, okay, I guess let's rent it out to people. We'll offset our rent. This will be great. We won't have to pay as much rent. This will be so good. So we start doing that. And things start rolling, and we're seeing this as a business model. And then we get kicked out. Kicked out. One day, note on the door, you're out, you got to go. There was like a lady next door, and she hated us because kids came in the space, and kids make noise, and she hated children, and she made this very clear. Got kicked out of that space. So now we've built this business, and my photography business at that time was booming, like because of that space, because of that thing I had to offer that nobody else really had to offer. Things started doing really well, and now it's pulled out from under me and it's gone. So I thought, well, I'll just go back to the other one. It's safe. I know I can do that. I know I can pay for that. It's really good. But this pull that I'm talking about was there, and it wouldn't go away. And so I found a space. It was actually my gym. It was like a cross-training gym. It was a dark, dingy, awful place. But they were looking to move, and they said, well, what if we cut just some windows? Because really what I need is tall ceilings and good light. Those are like my two main things, is I need tall ceilings, good light, and really nice floors. Those are my requirements now. So I said, well, what if we cut windows? So I said, well, then it would probably be okay if we can knock these ceilings out and cut windows, it'll be all right. And then we started talking about the price. Price for the rent was going to be $1,500 a month. So imagine for me, this girl that was used to paying, $250 a month, and then I was thrilled when that all got offset. How are we going to pay for $1,500 a month? So long story short, because I think I'm taking too long. Where am I at on time? Okay. I was absolutely petrified. I'm telling you, sweats and shaking, horrified. That was double our rent at the time, of the house we lived in, was to pay for that space. But I knew there was this need. I was watching it happen. So pay attention to what's really working for you within your field. Pay attention, write it down, and listen to it. Don't ignore it. If something's working, you pounce on that like a tiger. If you're like me and you've got this entrepreneurial spirit. So are you ready to do it? You've got all these things. Are you ready? Probably not. I was not at all. And I love this quote that I found, that the key to success is to start before you're ready. And I'm sure some people will argue that and say that's really irresponsible. You should never start until you're totally ready. But I would dare say most people are not ready to make a big move and to try something new and to take a risk. Most people are not going to say, I'm just ready, let's do this, But I did. So my little photography business that had grown into a big photography business was now jumping into something totally new, because I had the skills I knew what it needed. I knew what it needed to be. I knew what the photographers wanted. I had the skills to design it in a way that would work for them. I'm a photographer. I take great pictures in it, and I market those pictures to a business that's already built, my photography business, and market it there, and boom, all the photographers in the state know about it, and guess where they all want to shoot? Right here. So this was my first studio. This is my Bountiful location, which we actually just remodeled, and it doesn't have that wood wall anymore. And that other wall is a different color, but it's been really fun. That one is just over 3 years old that we built that one. And we built our second location. Oh, that's still Bountiful. That's kind of the big shooting area. And then we saw the Bountiful location working really well. That place has never not profited from the day it opened the doors, which is very rare and not usually how it happens. But again, like I said, when you see something working, pounce. So we immediately got to work on a location in St. George. That's where both me and my husband are born and raised. And I work there quite a bit. I've got a lot of clients there. I got a lot of friends and family, and people know me there. So I worked there quite a bit. And I would pretty frequently need a studio for newborns and things. And my brother had a guest room in his house that he didn't use, so I would use that. So I thought, no, we got to get to St. George and build that one. So we get to St. George. We invest all the money we've made from Bountiful into St. George to build that one. And a year and a half later, we see a need in Provo. So we built one in Provo. And here we are a couple years later. We took a little bit of a break because we were out of money and just tired. And we're working on our fourth location right now, which is in Sandy. So we used all of the tools that we had. We used the success of one thing to help build another thing, to help build another thing. It's like that ladder thing that you always see, which I think is the way to do it if you're building a business yourself, if you're an entrepreneur and you're building it yourself. You're your supporter for the first little while, so you use whatever's working and use that to launch the next thing. And invest and reinvest. I think you should be smarter than me and cut yourself a paycheck every now and then. I'm not very good at that. But it's worked so well to invest, and we did it so quickly, and I think we've got such a competitive edge. There are now lots of studios. You'll see them all over the place. Once we opened our doors and people saw how busy it was, we weren't the only ones that recognized that that was a good business model. So now there's tons of them, but there are not any that have multiple locations within the state, which is why I did that and why I did it so fast. You have to stay ahead. If you know you have a good idea, like I did with that Bountiful location, I knew within 2 months, this works. This is a good idea. We hustled, and we got them all in. So now we're probably one of the most successful studios in the state, I think, hopefully. So I wanted to talk a little bit about 10 things artists and entrepreneurs have in common. And again, artists is in art, photography, design, writing, anything like that. Or if you're an entrepreneur, and just want to help you like correlate how similar your brains work in those two industries. Intuition, something I guess I had, and I struggle like being up here. I feel like I'm saying like I am amazing, you guys. I really rocked it, but we did. But we've also made lots of mistakes along the way. We made lots of mistakes, very costly mistakes that are now really valuable lessons for us moving forward and knowing what not to do. But the intuition was there, and if you have it, and if it nags at you and it does not leave, do it. I very much believe that's a real tangible force of nature is intuition, and it is trying to get you something good. Follow it. Artists have it, and they follow it in the way they create, and entrepreneurs have it in the way they create and what they create. If you think about it, that's what they're both doing, right? Entrepreneurs are creating something out of nothing, creating their own things, and so are artists. We're just making our own things. Creativity, obviously. Thinking outside the box, which is something I've always said I'm not really good at that part, actually. I feel like for me, I was fortunate in that I was able to stay in my little photography box and just think, well, this is just another part of my box. Just barely outside of the box is my studio. But you do have to think of things, see a need, feel a need. Have you seen, what's that movie? Kids movie. Robots. See a need, feel a need. Very, very true. Obsessed. I would definitely classify myself in there. And, you know, sometimes to an unhealthy level, you also have to realize when to stop and when to slow down. And that's why we stopped for 2 years after we built Provo. We were growing really fast, and I got nervous, and I felt like we just needed to slow down for a little bit. So the obsession with the success and how well it was doing didn't overtake my sense. Like, we needed to rebuild our capital and get stable before we grew some more. And now we're back to that spot. So now we're, building a 4th location and looking at investors to help us get out of state. But it was good to take a break. Get your art, your product out there. Talked a little bit about social media, and that's just, me and Whitney are talking about it, how I really love and hate it so much because it's a huge part of my job. I would say 80% of my business comes from Instagram alone. And not 80, maybe 75, because I get a lot of referrals and return clients, things like that. But new business, really, really, really strongly coming from social media, which is an amazing tool that we have this free thing on the phone that every single one of us has, right in your wallet or right in your pocket, to get your work out there and to show it to as many people as you can. Don't be afraid to show it to people. Don't be afraid to ask them to show it to their friends. That is called hustle, and that's getting your product out there. And that is what you have to do to stay alive and stay relevant in these businesses. And take good care of your clients. Abolish perfectionism. You will screw up, I promise you, 1,000%, just like any other person will tell you. You will screw up. And I'll tell you, my biggest screw up was our St. George studio. Blinded I was by the success of Bountiful and the coolness of the space that I found in St. George. It's way too expensive. It's way too expensive. It's a different market in St. George, but I was so blinded by how perfect it looked that I ignored the numbers, and that one doesn't perform as good. Does okay, but it doesn't perform like the other ones does, and that was a big mistake because we also invested the most money into the remodel of that space. Yeah?
In the long run, what do you think you need to do with that location? Will you keep it?
So she says, and I have to repeat your questions for the online people. She says, what will I do with that St. George location in the long run? That lease is for 5 years. I don't know. It is getting a little better because we did kill the competition around us. There were tiny little studios that were much cheaper, but once they shot in white space, you didn't want to go back to that little one. So we killed off the competitors, and so we're starting to grow a little bit, so we're just kind of waiting. We're just kind of seeing what it does. It's not killing us, so we're just seeing right now. Anyway, so abolish perfectionism in your work, in my photography. I think that's one of the things that helped me grow the most. So when I talked about, like, here's a good, this shot, for example, is shot at Little Sahara, which is a really, really open sand dune location. Hard sun, hard light, things like that. And when I started doing shoots at Saltaire and places like this, people weren't doing them in the way that I was doing them. Everyone was you were bringing strobes. You had to have strobes or reflectors or something to combat that light. And I was like, I just want to work with it. I want to figure out a way to work with it. But in order to work with those really difficult conditions, what I learned, and is literally the number one thing, I have a class called Master of Light that I teach, and the first thing I tell you is to let go of the idea of this image being perfect. It's not going to be perfect. It's going to have flaws. Like if you look at this one, like sure, you could point out like mom's hair's blown out on the side. You know, that's ideally you don't want things blown out in your pictures, but like, do you care when you see this picture? No, hopefully. Shake your heads, no, we don't care. It's a beautiful picture. So what I teach people is to go into those really difficult circumstances and see what's great about it. What's great about full hard sun is color. You get amazing color in your sky. You get glow on your skin. You can feel the warmth of the picture. With that comes blown out highlights and shadows that are not flattering sometimes. So you learn to minimize the things that are bad and really accentuate the things that are great. And once I did that and learned to let go of the perfect ideas in my mind, what happened? Like it exploded. And then everyone was wanting me to teach them how to do it. And really the way to teach you how to do it is that's it. Like I teach that class a lot, and the more I teach it, the more I'm like, that's all I need to tell you is to let go of the idea of it having imperfections and you'll be great. Accentuate what's great and you will be great. Same in any other field. Get attention. I think same thing as just putting your work out there. Getting attention in whatever way you can. Talk to people about it. Go to classes. Network with people. Whatever you got to do. I really like this one. Produce in quantity to discover quality. So with photography, like what I was talking about earlier, when I was saying, like, you know, the ones that are great marketers, they're brand new photographers, but they're great marketers. You know, so they have a little bit of work that's great, and they have a lot of work that's not great. So when people hire them and they expect the really great and they get the majority of their work, which is not great, how do you think that works out? Not super good. So producing a really quality product and focusing on that instead of getting there quick. I think that's another thing that people struggle with now, is you see people rising like that so quickly and you want to do the same. My boat has been very slow. I mean, compared to a lot of the people that are successful, you know, within my age range. I'm 34, so anyone 40 and under. The younger ones are growing much faster than I was, and I just wouldn't change a dang thing. I've learned so much, and that information's so valuable. And guess who they're coming to now to try and teach them how to fix the mess they're in? The ones that have been doing it for a long time. Purpose. I find a lot of purpose in both aspects of my job. I love family work because family is my life. I'm a mom to 4 kids recently, like teenager, brand new. That's my life. And so that's why I don't show you my furniture collections that I have shot and the essential oil company, which are my best clients, honestly, because they're contracts and they make good money and they're great. But that's not where my heart is, and that's not my purpose in photography. My purpose is to create things like this that make people feel amazing. Where are we on time? 35. I have 35 minutes, or it's 35. Yes. Okay. Find your purpose. Like way back to the beginning, what pulls you? What do you love to do? What do you feel really good doing? That's what you're supposed to do, and that's your purpose. And then the studios, same. I love that people can go in and make the work that they couldn't make otherwise, that they couldn't make out in the parking lot or out at the mountains right now because everything's dead and ugly and cold and snowy. I love that I have this space that people can come in and make this amazing work that they're so proud of. I find a lot of purpose in that. Delegate so you can create. This comes a little bit later, but I'm telling you, the second you feel, when whatever field you're in, the second you feel like I can't do all these things, and you start to recognize that you can't do all those things, and so you're kind of, I was going to say swear, we can't do that. You are giving less than your full effort to all of those things, so everything's just kind of suffering a little bit because you're not able to give it your all. That's when you need to delegate. I hire out a ton of my stuff. I barely touch my studios. Just kidding, no, I do. I touch them. But I hired that out. I have an assistant that runs them. She does all the emails. She does all the bookings. I have a bookkeeper that does all the numbers for both businesses. I have cleaners that come in. But I'm to a place where I can afford that. You can't have all those things at once. But whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're struggling to keep up with, even if you hire out 5 hours of help a week in whatever area you need the help, I promise you those 5 hours will come back to you at least double. In your own productivity, in your own business, in your own sanity, it will come back to you. You can't do all the things. Nobody can. Okay, I think that's a lot of what I wanted to cover. I have a little bit more, but I wanted to do questions for a little bit. We have like 15 more minutes. Okay, what questions do we have? Super open book, so please ask anything. Because we have 20 minutes, y'all.
So at the studios, do you walk in or you have to book?
You book appointments. So the studios work as we have leases, contracted leaseholders for 6 months to a year. And the way we've kind of built that is I take on enough leaseholders to pay the rent. And that works really well for me. I have enough leaseholders to pay the rent in each space. And some of the rents are less than others. So I have less leaseholders in those because the hourly rentals make much more money. The leases are a really good deal, but they're nice because they're locked in. So it's worth it to me to make sure I'm locked in on my rent and I don't have to worry that I can't pay the rent this month. And then the hourly brings in the money. It's probably 60% more expensive to rent it hourly. But some people they only need an hour. They need an hour this month. The leases are for people that are doing, 7 to 15, 20 hours a month. So it just works a little different. Yeah?
So you sell to photographers, or just
What was that?
people? Do you lease it out to photographers or to
Yeah.
random people?
Anyone. So he asked, do I sell it to just photographers or lease to just photographers? No. 2 or 3 of my leaseholders are businesses. They're shop owners, local shop owners. I think 2 of them are like clothing boutiques and one's a jewelry boutique. They need to shoot their product. They need a place to shoot their product all the time, especially the clothing places. They're bringing in new product, weekly. New things coming in and they have to shoot them and have to get them out there. Got to get your stuff out there, right? So they need a place to shoot, so they rent the studio. Those work really well. So our next location is going to be in probably like the Lehigh, American Fork-ish area, because what is there a lot of right there? Does anyone know? Business. There's a lot of families also. A lot of businesses. What do they call it? The new Silicon Valley, right? Or something like that? Tons of businesses. Do businesses need to get their product out there? Do they need to shoot it? Yeah. So they need a place to do that. So that's what I'm going to build next. Seeing a need, filling a need. Other questions? Yeah.
How big is your space?
She asked how big the space is. They're all a little bit different, but pretty close. Bountiful is about 1,500 square feet total. St. George is a little bit smaller. Provo is about the same as St. George, so maybe 1,000, 1,200 square feet for the other ones. Sandy location is a little bit bigger. It's going to be 1,600 square feet. Hopefully the Lehigh location's bigger, more like 2,000, 2,500 square feet.
Did you reserve a specific space just for you to use, so you don't ever have to worry about someone else using it?
No, I would like that.
Okay. So you have to work around.
But
other
no,
people's
yeah.
space.
I mean, and I see my job changing, and I see, we're to a place now that I can't take on as much photography work. I'm still doing that very full time, but I can't take as much because I've got a family and kids, and the studios are supporting us financially. I don't need to shoot that much. But when I've been really, really busy shooting, I've very much wished I had my own space. We thought about building one into our house, but then we built studios instead of a house, so I share just like everybody else. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, right now, and I'm not up on the photography trends,
Mhm.
but right now the white space and minimalism is
Mhm.
very in.
Yep.
And so how do you see into the future when that trend shifts?
Yeah. We shift too, and we evolve, and that's why we just remodeled the Bountiful Studio. It's only been 3 years, which felt really crazy to me to reinvest money. I'm like, it just opened, and it's so successful. But everyone that's opened their own studios, guess what they all look like? They look the exact same as mine. Which I get it. Like, we don't have a patent on the building of a studio, but there's a ton that look like mine now. So now we're in a phase where we're needing to create something different. That's why we kind of remodeled the Bountiful Studio to give it a new look. The Sandy location will look very different. All my studios, like you can see, are pretty bright, airy, some pops color. Sandy's going to have 2 spaces. One that's very true white space, very clean white, lots of light. Second space is going to be like all concrete, floor, ceiling, like old industrial steel windows and things like that. So it's got a very like dark warehouse vibe and get those kind of moodier images, because nobody else really has that right now. So we're gonna evolve, and we're gonna change, because what I see people asking for is something new. They love my studios, but they're like, we're just getting tired of it, and I'm tired of it. I like them, but I'm kind of tired of shooting in that same thing over and over, and so now we've got to look at ways to make them a little bit different. So every business, I think, needs, if you can't change and evolve, I won't say the name of the person, but someone very, very close to me is refusing to do that, and their business is burning to the ground very quickly. So you do need to learn to change and adapt and listen to what people are telling you. Yeah.
Do you hire an interior designer to like change it up?
I'm going to in Sandy. I've never hired an interior designer because I keep them mostly empty. Mostly what people want is a big open space where they can work and make whatever they want. But Sandy, I want to feel a little bit extra well done. I'm like, I go to IKEA and I buy whatever's minimal and I like. But this one we are going to hire a designer and try and make it really, really nice, really unique. This is the plan. Any other questions? Do we have anyone in here that's into photography? Just curious. Art, design, writing? None of that? One?
Going into it.
Awesome.
Started to use this year, and she's
Cool. I haven't convinced you to jump into this wonderful industry? All right.
I play around with it, but it's not.
I played around with it too. It's exactly how I started, playing around. You never know. Okay.
Just one more question. So you have all this business going on with rents
Yeah.
and employees and
Mhm.
all of that, how do you separate yourself from that and focus on the creative?
Delegate. Yeah. She asks, how do we, when we're running all these multiple things, again, I delegate a lot of it. Like I said, I'm in this place where I'm having to make a little bit of a shift in where I spend my time. Because we're, changing all the studios and we're expanding the studios and looking out of state now, that's taking up so much more of my time. So I'm probably just not going to be able to book quite as many photography sessions. Hire out whatever I can't do and minimize the stuff that I feel like is working the best for me.
Do you have another photographer that works with you if you're busy?
Yeah. She asked if I have another photographer that works for me. I don't yet. My assistant Karen, who's based in St. George, so she physically manages the St. George studio. She's a photographer as well, and I've been begging her and training her. to become an associate photographer for me. I think that would be super, super smart so she could handle my St. George clients. She's learned under me, she's trained under me, she's gonna do just as well as far as her work. And so I'm hoping one day that's something that I can, because I don't want to let go of the great client base that I've built. So like for example, July is a really busy month for my photography, mostly because of Albion Basin. You guys know where Albion Basin is? The top of Little Cottonwood Canyon. It's like the mountains and this wildflower field, and it's like out of this world. People book me to shoot that like a year in advance. So I'm all booked out for July. And so a lot of my clients that I really want to take, and I can't because I don't have any more time, if I had a second photographer, that would be super, super handy. So I hope for that someday. I would have a hard time trusting someone with that one because that's the artist part of you that doesn't want to let go of the control of your work and what has your name on it. But she's one that I feel like I would trust. Cool. Thank you guys.